Yes, from this conference, we expect that we should be able to come out with very clear, detailed advocacy points that we use to engage the various structures of overseas development aid that is coming to Africa, OECD, for instance. Whatever comes out from here, we are going to use it to engage OECD. That I mentioned to you a while ago that we have been able to establish, an OECD DAC civil society reference group where civil society from both the north and the south come together to sit on the table with officials of the OECD that are giving to also let them know of our development priorities and our agenda, our challenges we are facing. So it is one of the things we are going to come up with advocacy points that we're going to use to engage. We are going to also look at other areas of resources because it's about financing for development. Looking inwards in Africa. Because there's no man that can help you develop yourself. You are the person that can help yourself develop yourself. So if as Africans, we cannot look inwards to develop ourselves, then it means we have lost it.
Reality of Aid Africa Network hosted a meeting to bring together experts from civil societies based in African Organizations for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD) countries to discuss and dialogue around advocacy opportunities towards OECD and development assistance (CAD). The meeting aimed at providing a forum for OECD country-based Africa CSOs to explore and build synergies toward engagements with DAC structure processes. The meeting also discussed strategies for building partnership and network collaboration on key thematic issues of the DAC, which include enhanced understanding of the OECD DAC, shared consensus on how to make DAC work relevant at the national level for African countries, and development of African Euro CSOs engagement priorities for 2020. While officially opening the conference, Leo Atapu, the chairman Reality of Aid Africa Network, said that Africa needs to protect her natural resources and called on leaders to provide enabling environments for boosting domestic economy.
Our leaders need to focus more on creating the needed enabling environment for boosting the domestic economy, enhancing private trade, which is key to sustainable development, and lastly, working out a development agenda that works for the people.
Vitalis Major, who is the Executive Director, Reality of Africa Network, said that financing is a very important component for financing Africa development agenda, but it is equally important to examine the finances that come in and how they are used.
As you know, development financing is a very important component of Africa's development agenda, and we want to have that discussion and form an informed opinion to also continue advising African governments on the need to strengthen their own efforts to indeed fund their own budgets that go towards development projects. He
further said, corruption is a global phenomenon and it is a responsibility of us all to end the menace.
This is really a global phenomena that we must find a way of addressing. Indeed, corruption must be one of those things that we tackle before we get good quality financing for development.
In addition, Major argued that the issues with corruption is not really about the agencies to fight graft, but rather a mindset where even the public should exercise their mandate on demanding accountability.
Corruption is not really an institutional issue alone. So it's not about having the EACC, it's not about having the law, it's not just about having the presidents talk about it. It's really a change in mindset and having the citizens to demand accountability, not because the institutions demand it, but the citizens themselves who are the real taxpayers having a conversation.
Eugene Ribasira, the RDO Rwanda, reiterated on the need for African governments to utilize the natural resources and practice good governance, adding that Africa has the capacity to fund its projects.
It has the capacity to develop its financial agenda, development agenda rather, because it has resources, it has the capacity, but we don't employ the resources rightly. Right now, our portion of trade internationally is 3%. That means we are contributing 3% of the ideas in the global development. So it's only when we can increase our voice on international trade agenda that we can be meaningful partners in development. Right now we are using foreign money, yet development is for our own people. So how do we generate resources from our own sources such that we compete favorably? Otherwise, we can't be equal players when we are getting more than 30%, more than 70% of aid that we commit to our development. And my message to the East African government would be that let's promote good governance, let's serve the interests of our people, let's listen to our people, let's make use of the vote that we got from our people to work in the interests of our people.
Leo Atapu, the chair of the Reality of Africa Network, said that most of the African nations have continued to rely on foreign financial aid, yet they are in a position to fund them.
Africa has been, over the years, depending on aid in ways and manners that they believe that without foreign aid, they cannot do anything in Africa. We cannot do anything in Africa.
Leo pointed out that illicit finance, corruption, and bad governance are to blame for Africa's woes to development.
In the past 50 years, Africa has received over $1 trillion in foreign aid in various countries to finance various development programs. But if you travel across Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, you find out that the $1 trillion that has entered Africa is not equal to the development you find in Africa. So what could be responsible for that?
He said that it is time Africa realized its potential and stop relying on African aid as they come with vested interest.
Africa needs to look inwards. We need to develop our own resources. We need to prevent foreign interests from removing our resources in Africa. We need to develop our own resources and use those resources to develop our people. We need to improve governance in Africa. We need to improve enabling environment. We need to also provide infrastructure.
In an interview with a few participants across the continent, challenges faced on donor funding and the impact of the assistance is more or less the same. Martin Shunku, African Development Interchange Network ADIN from Cameroon, said that in as much as we need assistance, we need to be in a position to generate our own resources to fund our project.
Are we in dire need of funding? I wouldn't say so. Indeed, we need to be supported by our foreign partners, but what we need the most is to generate our own resources for our development, meaning that we need to organize well in domestic resource mobilization.
Martin adds that donor funding comes with vested interest, and that is something that we should not be shy of.
Generally, those who bring the assistance also want to serve their interests. So we should expect that they have some conditionalities linked to their support. And this is an issue for us. And this should guide the way we collaborate with them, the way we negotiate with them. As they serve their interests, which is normal, we should be in a position to serve ours. I think that's maybe where we are having issues. We don't really put forward our interests clearly to discuss at a...
Mohamed Adam from Ghana says Africa could be better if tax policies were fixed and well managed.
The critical point is that we are a lower middle income country. We are no longer the darling boy of donors like the World Bank and all those, the OECD development assistance, official development assistance that used to come to our country. We have to be on our own. We need to raise enough revenue. We need to actually walk the talk by making sure that we fix our tax policy and the way we administer our taxation policy in Ghana to be able to raise. We have the potential. The potential is there, is huge. We only have to get it right. and making sure that we raise the revenues that is needed to be able to support development in education, in health, and social protection. These are critical areas that really need support from government. And that when we are able to fix this, I think we will be moving towards the path of being a more sustainable country, a country where we care for each other, that is more equitable in terms of the development outcomes that we aspire to achieve.
Ishmael Zulu from Zambia says that donor funding should not be seen as a solution to Africa's problems, but rather be treated as a catalyst to our development.
In Africa, we accept, due to various reasons, some that we've already highlighted. Donor funding is important, but donor funding shouldn't be our main resolution to the problems that we have. Donor funding should only act as a catalyst. We should equip ourselves, each and every African country. We should have a solid strategy in how we're going to take ourselves from where we are, where we were before, to where we want to be, in order to see development, in order to see economic growth, especially for the people, and this goes out to leaders in government, especially for the people that we represent, the people that don't have a voice, the people that are in the far-flung areas that don't have access to water, that don't have access to basic necessities. These are the people that we represent, and we must find ways to develop plans that can see them lifted out of extreme poverty, in order to see them lead a somewhat normal, what we call a normal life. Yeah.
During the conference, a number of issues were highlighted, among them being the imbalance between donor interest and the national interest, an issue Julie Seegers, an advocacy advisor at the Oxfam International, said that they are looking into how to reconcile the interest with the risk-informed and need-based priorities.
Right. So that's something we've discussed a lot. It's this point about, in theory, aid should be all about reducing poverty, reducing inequality, and working in the interest of people in Africa. The reality of it, obviously, is that it still is a geopolitical tool, and many donors use it partly to serve their own national interests. So, for example, they will use it to subsidize their companies who come to Africa. They will use it to have deals with African governments to limit migration flows, so to limit the number of migrants arriving to Europe. They will use it also to advance their security interests. For example, in the Sahel region at the moment, a lot of aid is linked to the security agenda. So these are some of the challenges we discussed. And I think here again, this is why this meeting and the coalition that we are forming together is so important, because it's about holding these donors to account. We're obviously cognizant of the fact that this is still a political tool, but the focus needs to be about what matters for the people here. And this is what we will be working on together with colleagues.
In regards to humanitarian development, Bernard Sabiti, Development Initiative Uganda, pointed out that there are several donors in a single project with their own interests, which do not necessarily mind the people.
Sometimes the interests of the donors are actually in conflict with the national interest of donor recipient countries. And I think this is why I was saying that the interest of the donor should not be the major priority within the whole idea of giving aid. I think the national interest of the recipient country, its development priorities, should inform donors' decisions to provide aid, not the other way around. And I think one of the things that we need to do is to conduct a thorough assessment of who is giving aid, where, and what exactly is the impact of this aid. I think you cannot just give donors a blank check just because they are coming into a country to provide relief. There should be rules, there should be coordination and more partnership with recipient countries, so that development assistance actually reaches those that are most in need, and not having these siloed or duplicated initiatives which in the end do not have the intended results.
While total support remains a fundamental issue, Jan van de Powell, a representative from Eurodad, pointed out that there is a need for transparency in the flow of resources to aid in the meeting the end-term goal of the organization.
Our major objective is we are convinced that ODA, Official Development Assistance, is a key resource for sustainable development. What we are seeing that now donor countries are not achieving their commitments, just to spend 0.7% of their income in development assistance. And we also see that there's many factors that make it not the optimal flow of development. So we want to make this more effective so that it actually contributes to sustainable development in partner countries. Now, I think this was a great conference, a great opportunity. There's many colleagues from all over the African region. We had very stimulating discussions on all the different topics and issues that are on the agenda in the DAC. And again, it's key to have civil society voices of partner countries heard at the DAC, because that's where decisions are made about how development cooperation is being done, and it's key to have the optimal impact. It's crucial to have experiences from partner countries voiced in those fora.
Efforts to achieve SDGs should not only provide a stronger safety net for people's survival, but also provide an enabling environment where they can participate in wealth creation and distribution.
Well, the most important, I think, for all of us is that we must recognize that nobody can live on their own. We live through partnerships. The work that we do, the resources that we get, if we build valuable partnerships on both sides, between us, the recipients, and the donors, that will be one of the big things that will help us to unlock any challenges we have.
In the short term, if you're a decision maker, it's nice to get people to shut up, but at the end of the day, people need a vent, they need an outlet, they need to feel they've been heard, and they need to feel that their concerns have been dealt with, or else you're just going to lead to problems down the line.
I think one of the things we need to recognize is the role of aid in Kenya's development. Like I said before, 85% of the budget towards development is funded by aid. And currently, Kenya stands number 4 in Africa in terms of the amount of aid that it receives. In fact, in terms of Kenya's net expenditure on public expenditure, 17% of that money comes from foreign aid. And so how we manage these resources, how we plan with them, is going to have a big impact in future on how Kenya progresses in its development. That's why we have to address the issue of aid dependence, right? Working out of aid and being, you can't be over 50 years old and still be receiving aid. Something is wrong there. And we need to start addressing this picture. That's why we're also having this discussion as Africans. How do we win out of aid and become independent states that we are supposed to be, not just politically?